Welcome to Tribe Talk, Sunday, March 28th, 2021. This is our official Tribe Talk 1-year anniversary. So I'd like to thank you all for showing up and being here for a year now. The purpose, as always, of Tribe Talk is just a group of like-minded people getting together. We have so much more in common than we have differences, and it's our ability to come together, communicate, have a dialogue about motorcycle and being rider coaches and instructors in rider education, share our experiences and ideas for the betterment of what we now call the tribe. It's key to mention that this is independent, regardless of who may show up. This is not sponsored by any organization, and we accept everybody that comes here. So I want to thank you for showing up tonight. Some Zoom hints. If you're new, and I've seen we have at least one new person here tonight, and you haven't been on here before, there's a few things that are available to you in Zoom. Generally, we don't have problems with crosstalk, but if you have trouble getting into the conversation, go ahead and raise your hand icon. Please ensure that you have your full name and location in your the name on the screen. And if you have any technical difficulties, please try to re-enter. If I go off, we have co-hosts that will take over, and I will ask you just to be patient and carry on without me. Tonight, I'd like to welcome Mark Weiss from Arizona. He is going to be giving a discussion topic on professional development, something that he originally started back in 2017, 2018. He presented it at IRETS 2018, and I'm sure he's made updates and modifications to it since then. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And Mark, are you ready to take this on?
Let's see. For some reason, we're not at the beginning. There's the beginning. But are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, and we can see your slides.
Okay. That's odd. The present option is now missing. But nonetheless, we'll go on. Okay, so as Don said, this is a continuation of an earlier presentation. Originally done as an IRETS, and just I've continued poking at it over the last few years. So some things to know: it's not finished. It's an accumulation of information. It's not necessarily MSF, but it's pretty well aligned. Not everyone agrees with everything I put into this, but it's successful if it makes you think. So here we go. So one of the communication books that I recommend is Alan Alda's. If I understood you, I have this look on my face. Very, very good book. I've enjoyed it, read it multiple times. But one of the things that Alan Alda suggested was that presentations can make more sense if they start with a story. So this is the story that kicked off my whole investigation. I had gone out of state to conduct a rider coach prep, which is always risky because you never know exactly what you're going to get. And during the weeks leading up to the prep, the number of candidates that were supposed to be there fluctuated up and down, up and down. And then I got there, and I was told all the candidates were going to be prepared and have their materials ahead of time. And on the morning of the first day, I found the building I was supposed to go to, and 8 candidates showed up. 2 of them had actually received their rider coach guides the day before, and others over a short period of time prior to that. None of them had seen a BRC in 2 years or more, and that was the material I had to start with. So that night of the first day, instead of watching the motorcycle race like I wanted to, I was trying to figure out how to save the rider coach prep for this group of candidates. And so what I did was to Oh, animation doesn't work this way. Okay, so what I did was to try to figure out what the candidates needed to be successful. At the end, this was a 7-day prep, so I had just a week, and it sort of lost the first day. So I figured, I made my list. They need to know the structure of the class they were going to teach. They needed to have writing skill, at least BRC level or beyond. I was hoping that was so. They needed to understand the basics of adult learning and motor skill development. Most of them had some teaching or training experience, which was going to be good. They needed to have class facilitation skills. I had no idea how well they were prepared for that. They needed to be ready to manage the teaching environment. So not just their facilitation skills, but to be aware of how the class was doing. They needed to recognize risk or lack of safety and actively manage what was going on, not just in the classroom, but also on the range. And they needed to understand that it was going to be their responsibility to develop as coaches, that where they were going to be at the end of a rider coach prep was just at the minimal level for becoming coaches. And so I moved on. One of the books that was recommended by Dan Pedersen was Charlotte Danielson's Enhancing Professional Practice, a Framework for Teaching. And again, recommended reading. The first part of the book is very relevant to what we do because it involves how standards can be developed and what makes them relevant and how to validate the process and decide whether it's something usable or not. And what I was using to assist me was that one of her tenets is that competencies that you're looking at must not be duplicated. So when you're looking at what a rider coach or what a future teacher needs to be able to do, you need not to duplicate criteria in multiple areas. You need to find a way to consolidate it so that it's more readily evaluated and more readily developed and more readily understood. So things like knowledge and writing skill are both knowledge of the subject. So those actually get to go in a single area. Safety, again, can, whether it's on the range or in the classroom, can be grouped into the same category. And what I came up with was 5 key areas that hopefully everything that we as rider coaches needed to do would fit into without ending up in more than one category. So one was facilitation and teaching skills. Another category to develop was knowing applicable learning principles, whether they be motor skill or adult learning in the classroom. We need to have the relevant knowledge of the subject that we're teaching. We need to understand the nature of managing the training environment, indoors, outdoors, whatever's going on. And then also rider coaches need to understand that they're responsible for professional development. It's not something that just waiting it's going to happen, but it's up to us to go out and move ourselves along further. So here's a look at what I put into each of those 5 main categories. And these aren't exhaustive lists, but it's an idea. So facilitation, I figured with my candidates, that's going to take time to develop. It's not something that you can just explain, but it happens through experience. It happens through trial and error. It happens exactly the way our BRC candidates learn. You give them an idea, they try it, they evaluate what's happening, figure out what to do next, and give it another try. So it's something that's experiential, and it needs to be hands-on. And it seemed to be a logical anchor point for rider coach competency, because everything kind of ties into it as the rider coaches develop. Then understanding learning principles. Mostly it's section 5 of the Rider Coach Guide. What do we need to know, and how are they going to work with it? And again, it seems to develop through something that needs to be developed through experience. You can read an awful lot, but until you try it and see what happens, it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. So again, trial and error for the rider coaches. Subject matter, that seemed to be fairly easy, at least the knowledge part, because we've got Rider Coach Guide, we've got range chart, so it's always on hand. The main thing for the rider coach candidates to learn is that they need to occasionally time out and take a look at the material. They need to not be afraid to check, to look at their range cards or flip through the Rider Coach Guide or check their notes to make sure they've got the right information, and to be aware that they need to stay up on it because the stuff fades. It's not permanent. So you need to deliberately work to maintain your skill level as a coach. And that includes riding skills as well, getting out and practicing, not just making U-turns, but practicing braking skills, practicing swerving skills, practicing cornering skills. At BRC level and outside the class, making sure that you are able to do and able to understand what's going on with what you teach. Being an expert, whatever an expert rider would be, being at that level's probably handy, but it's not required. I certainly know a lot of rider coaches who have extraordinary riding skills, but aren't very good rider coaches. So it doesn't seem to be something that just makes that happen. But again, it's like having extra knowledge. It's helpful, but the rider coach has to be responsible enough to figure out how to use it well. And managing the training environment, again, hands-on. We can talk about it a lot. We can identify make a list of what are risks in the field, on the range, what are risk factors in the classroom, but how you manage it happens through experience, through seeing things develop, the ability to see something happening now and be able to predict what's going to be going on in a few moments or a few minutes. And again, rider coach materials being on hand is super helpful. And then professional responsibility, getting that idea across all the time, always trying to emphasize to the rider coaches, to the candidates, that what they're learning is the beginning. For one thing, it helps to alleviate frustration as they come up against things they're not really ready for, but it also lays the foundation for the idea that the rider coach prep is the start, and they can go a long way afterwards, but it's up to them. So those were my 5 areas and the things I felt that I needed to address with the class. And mostly it seemed like it was going to be hands-on, that it wasn't going to be a matter of my doing a whole bunch of presentations or running them through the books or doing a bunch of drills or asking a lot of questions. It was going to be my task to set up situations where they could apply knowledge bit by bit, not in great amounts, but little by little, and develop their abilities and confidence in their abilities. And I don't know if it's willingness to make mistakes, but understanding that mistakes are going to occur and that they're experiences to learn from. And so, looking at how, oh, I misspelled professional. What do you know? I can fix that now. There, that's better. Okay, so must not have spell checker in Google Slides. So why establish after the rider coach prep or as it was going on? It's like, why do we need to come up with a set of standards anyway? How is this going to be useful? And a lot of this, the ideas came from Danielson, from her book. You know, having measurable competencies is common to most professions. It gives you a framework for not just evaluating others, but for evaluating yourself, and looking for gaps. It establishes a common language, not just amongst our peer group, but among other professions that have similar requirements. And then I found the last statement, the last list here, I thought was really important, that the assessments, the criteria needs to be out in the open. There can't be any secrets. It has to be something that anybody has access to, from rider coach candidates to the most highly experienced coaches or trainers or QA personnel or whoever they might be. Everybody needs to be able to see the same set of rules, have the same set of information, be able to see the same criteria. That's the only way it's going to be effective. You know, how can you know if you're doing well if the criteria that you'll one day be evaluated with isn't known to you? And how can you tell if somebody else is doing well if you don't know what criteria they believe apply to them? So taking what I started with what the coaches needed to know, and moving it into a set of the 5 categories, 5 competencies or domains or whatever terms you want to use, and then looking at where might these standards, where might there be a list of this stuff. So what was clear was the categories needed to be comprehensive, they need to be clearly defined, and they needed to provide a structure that was useful. So what did my rider coaches need, my candidates need? They needed to know how to teach. They needed to know how to conduct the class. They needed to understand the basic learning principles that they were going to work with. They needed to understand how to expect that novice riders would develop skills so that you can adjust what you're doing to fit the way people learn. They needed to understand the environment they were going to have to manage. Even just classrooms with different layouts present different challenges, and how to deal with that. How to deal with safety, how to deal with weather, how to deal with the machinery that you'll have, how to deal with the facilities that you're given. And then the responsibility to continue to develop. So that's what they needed. And let's see. So going back to seeing if I'm following the rules, to me, that list seems pretty well comprehensive. The different categories seem to divide well enough, so there was no redundancy. I didn't have something that fell into more than one category. They can be clearly defined, more than fits on one slide, but that would take forever to read. And provided a coherent structure, so there was something that, as the trainer, that I could use to assess how things were going. And then we look at how are we going to assess how someone's progressing. And the first category was, the first level was interesting. It's gone through a whole bunch of changes as far as that first term, but one that came out in IRETS during one of the sessions was that first level could, and I don't remember exactly what profession this came from, but that the first level could be considered not yet competent rather than incompetent, because incompetent is someone who has experience and just doesn't do well. They don't pay attention, they don't follow the guidelines. But someone who's not yet competent, someone who's just learning, then someone who has learned, so they've reached competency, someone who's gone beyond that and they're accomplished, they're skilled at what they're doing, and the mastery level. So I guess this is repetition here. So a rider coach candidate is at the not yet competent level. They're learning, they're making their way along. And then some examples, and the examples mostly came from Charlotte Danielson's book, and the ideas of failing to utilize our basic evaluations. When you look in the rider coach guide of what are the skills that we're looking for, not consistently or not regularly hitting on those are things we expect from rider coach candidates, but we expect them to get better. So that's before they reach competency. By the end of the RCP, they should be competent. They should be mostly on track with what they're supposed to be doing. And probably most importantly is they should recognize when something's amiss. They might not know how to fix it, but at least recognize that they're not quite there yet. And even for us, even for experienced coaches, we should expect that while we're generally pretty well accomplished, that when we're working with new curriculum or new material or developmental exercises or activities in the classroom, that we're probably going to drop back to the merely competent level. We're just going to be working with what's been given to us and not be able to stand back and sort of look at it from the outside, because we'll be totally involved with it from the inside, just trying to carry it along. Accomplished level. That's probably where most of us get to, where most of us are. We understand what we're supposed to be doing. We conduct courses regularly enough that we stay in tune with what's supposed to be happening, and we keep ourselves up to date, and we provide ourselves with enough preparation time that every course is going to be a good course. We understand how people learn. We're able to evaluate the progress of our class, and we're able to adjust to fit what our students need. And we're ready for the unexpected. We're ready for the group that's different or the student that's different. And we're willing and able to adjust the way we prefer to teach to something that better fits the riders when we need to. So that's where probably most of us, if we're taking the time to come to Tribe Talk, we're probably in this group or getting there on our way. Then the last level, the master level, this is a description from Danielson's book. I basically took out the word teacher and put in rider coaches and program to fit what we're doing. And I liked her quote at the end that master level performance is a good place to visit, but don't expect to live there. Those are the times when everything goes perfectly. Everything's just happening. You're able to stand back, kind of like a flow state. You're able to think of things that are going on beyond the classroom and operate in the classroom quite competently at the exact same time. Things are happening the way they're supposed to, and we are setting up what's to happen, but not actually making it occur. We're able to set it up well enough that we can stand back and watch. So it's nice when it goes that way. So the problem with Danielson's book is after that, the first third of the book, it gets deep into teaching, specifically teaching in elementary and high school. And there's a lot of definitions and standards and descriptions of different situations and how things are handled. But it's where we diverge. It's where the professions change. So where do we find what we need to know? And this is mostly really new stuff, like within the past few weeks, at least for this presentation. Because I was thinking, I really don't want to develop a whole new set of definitions all on my own. And then fortunately, I just finished a rider coach prep and sort of remembered that the standards were already there. So this is all from the rider coach guide for these next 5 competencies. They're the 5 that I came up with back in that hotel room. And This is definitely not an exhaustive list. Basically, what I did was I went through the Rider Coach Guide almost entirely in section 5, a little bit outside of it, and basically filled up each slide. There's more that we could come up with, but these are the the Rider Coach evaluation points. This is how you would look at someone. How would you assess that their facilitation and teaching skills are good, or they're competent or accomplished, or not yet competent? What are they missing on? What are you looking for? So this is all out of section 5, facilitation and teaching skills. It's this and more. Understanding of learning principles. There was a lot more than this, but these were somewhat highlights. The recognition of motor skill stages and how they develop. Understanding of adult learning and the dynamics of group learning, how it can accelerate the pace and at the same time make learning more effective. Understanding how feedback works and recognizing that there aren't any perfect rules, like your feedback should only 5 words or only 10 seconds or anything like that, because 10 seconds of feedback is a wasted 10 seconds when you have a student that needs 2 minutes of feedback, or 10 seconds of feedback may be way too much when you've got somebody who just needed a nod. So there are no rules like that. Motor skill knowledge and motorcycle knowledge, understanding what makes successful motorcyclists, operating in traffic, how we can get the riders to realize that safety needs to be a higher priority, or that it needs to be a priority, and how to get them to recognize the steps to get there. The need to self-assess constantly, and riding skill, what's needed to be able to start riding on the road. The managing the environment. What does a facilitator need to do? What do we need to do to manage the classroom? Again, all right out of the guide. Last one, rider coaches should identify the opportunities to coach in a helpful way, not only to prevent incidents, but to accelerate learning. Classroom and range. Professional responsibility and development. So understanding all of the things that we teach and taking the time and putting in the effort to go beyond what's in the Rider Coach Guide, have a better understanding of what it may be that a particular student needs, or what it may be that's giving a particular student difficulty. How to provide a positive environment and what's involved with that. So, how do we assess whether or not a rider coach is not yet competent, or they're competent or accomplished or beyond? It's all in the Rider Coach Guide. There's no mystery. When someone comes to a site to evaluate the rider coaches, they should be using the criteria in the Rider Coach Guide. There isn't need or anything else. When we are looking at ways to further develop ourselves, or wondering what could raise our skill level, raise our competency, all we need to do is look in the guide. It's there. And then this developed at the IREDS conference, and it was how to visualize the whole thing. And I guess somewhat from my background, I like graphics. And so we've got the five-pointed system, the pentagon, the rider coach map. So we've got 5 competencies, and then 4 levels of development that could apply to any of them. And the way this graphic works, the areas that you see are, in my idea, they're relevant to the amount of effort it's going to take to move from one level to another. You know, the not yet competent, that's where you start, that's the core. And then each time you raise your game, you move to a higher level of ability and understanding, the gap increases exponentially. I'd probably like to make the gaps even larger, especially the last couple, but wouldn't fit on a slide. Or the center stuff would be so small it would be too hard to see. But you get the idea that the area greatly increases, the amount of effort and time it's going to take greatly increases. And then putting it together, the idea here is that the arrows represent the effort that's going to be required to maintain this. It's not something that will stay. It takes constant effort to keep pushing, especially pushing beyond accomplishment up towards the master level. It takes a huge amount of effort, and it needs to be maintained because this is something that is constantly trying to collapse inwards. If I remember, the analogy we came up with at one of the sessions was it's kind of like, you know, being inside a bungee cord, that as you push out in one area, push out in another area, now you've got more tension because your time and effort is spent in a few areas, and then other areas start to push in. And it's just a constant exercise of pushing on one and then realizing that another one needs more attention, another area needs more attention, and just continually moving around and always asking yourself, am I doing a good job? How's this going? And so that's the idea. We've got a set of standards or measures or evaluations that we already have in writing that are there for us. We can sort them into 5 basic areas. Safety in the classroom and safety in the range, on the range, can be together because they're a matter of managing the environment. Facilitation on the range, facilitation in the classroom is still basically the same. We're still setting up situations for setting up activities for our students to work in, setting up situations and activities for rider coach candidates to work on. We set it up and then they are the ones that develop it. Understanding learning principles is the knowledge of deciding whether what we're doing is going to be beneficial to our students. Continuing to develop professionally, working on more, gaining more knowledge, and sort of the more knowledge you gain, the more you realize you don't know, and then you just keep having to push out further. Understanding the curriculum better and better. Just because you teach 20 or 30 or 50 classes a year doesn't mean that you know the curriculum that well, because maybe you don't have time to reflect on what's going on when you're teaching a class every single week. And so effort needs to be put in it because it's not something that's automatic. And so that's what we came up with. And so reading lists, these were the key books that I used for finding more information. Then, of course, special thanks to Dan Pedersen, who said, yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you work on it? And Don, who pretty much said the same thing. And there were others in the group, but they basically gave me the push off of the edge and set me to work. So that's the presentation. Now for talking. I'm going to go to stop share. And we're back. That worked?
It did, and thank you very much for that excellent walk through your presentation there, Mark. I think this changes a lot in at least my mind, as I wrote some notes, that we really need to go further with this. What I'd really like to know, though, is what everybody else thinks. What are your thoughts and ideas about what Mark presented tonight? And do you have any questions for him?
I'd like to know, how did the prep go
Prep
from our
went
story at the beginning?
really, oh,
You're
am I
good.
on? Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Prep went really well. And the thing that told me things had gone right was that during student teaching, because it was very difficult to tell how we were doing, because there was, as you can imagine, there was a lot of pressure. We were in student teaching. It was part 2 of exercise 5. I remember this because the students were riding the perimeter. No, it was the old DRC. It was DRC 2013, because we had all 12 students out there. They're riding the perimeter, and it was just this kind of slow-moving, steady-speed freight train. They weren't speeding up. They weren't slowing down. They were just nose to tail following each other around the range. And as I was thinking, should I do something about this? The candidates on their own, without any prompting and any prior discussion at all, stopped the students, said to the students, we must not have made things clear enough because you're not doing what we were hoping for, re-explained what was supposed to be going on the perimeter, and then set the students out again and successfully solved the problem on their own. And from that point on, I was able to sit down because I recognized that they understood what it was they needed to do, and they solved the problem without any panic. They didn't, when they realized something was going wrong, that was step 1. And they didn't look to me for the answer. They looked at the rider coach cards, and yes, I did let 1 or 2 other candidates get out there to help, because they were like, can we go out? And they did have to discuss what to do, but they on their own came up with a solution, and quickly, and then solved the problem. And then the rest of the prep went that way. There were errors, but they were able to fix every single one without any panic, and without shortchanging their students.
Mark, I have a question. In your experience, and not that it should be prejudged or anything, but do you think that candidates that either teach professionally or are in an education field have an advantage over an average person who's not in an education type field, as far as grasping the concepts of the prep and the facilitation skills and everything that we certainly need to develop?
I think it can be an advantage, but the candidate has to be someone who, if they have that background, it has to be someone who recognizes the importance of professional development, because you can get somebody who does have a background as a presenter of some sort, but are set in what they do and happy with the way it goes and haven't moved beyond that. And so when they get into a rider coach prep, which may require different versions of their skills or changes to their skills, they don't necessarily recognize that and sometimes tend to stick with what they know rather than trying to move to something new. And so it can go both ways.
I think that's true with teachers as students as well, that, some teachers are very receptive to the adult learning styles that we use in the BRC, and other ones prefer and expect to be lectured to, and they're somewhat at odds with that.
Yeah, it depends on the individual.
Mark, do you, or maybe anybody else who cares to offer an opinion, have any best tips, or what are your good ways to sell to coach candidates the idea of professional development really being our own responsibility, and that is an ongoing thing versus just relying on what your program makes you do as a rider coach?
Well, for me, the adjustments I've made to the way I conduct a rider coach prep, I hope helps with that. In that I don't spend a lot of time drilling on the details of how to conduct classroom activities or how to conduct range exercises. I address some of the base components of how to conduct a range exercise. Like we do some drills on how to get riders in and out of staging, or how to switch from one part of an exercise to another. So those components, but then it becomes the responsibility of the candidates to actually work out how to apply those components to the material they have in front of them and actually conduct an exercise. And similar for the classroom. We have some activities that just foster basic communication and facilitation skills, and then we demonstrate some of the basic components of some of the activities, like how to conduct the peripheral vision activity. It's got a specific procedure, but as far as how to, I mean, for the movements, but as far as how to conduct it as an activity, the coaches have to rely on the rider coach guide and the material in section 5. So with the hope that they'll recognize that's what's going on and continue afterwards, that they'll continue to look for more. Well, in the last rider coach prep I did a month ago, Sarah was there. So she might be able to provide some insight onto, hi Sarah, what I did to the poor candidates.
I would love to share that for the first time ever, I saw a big emphasis on the structure and the sequencing of things, and not a lot of push on the content. And I saw the content slowly, the candidates kind of slowly gobbled up the content and put it where it needed to go. They came into the prep, and Mark started with this large picture, and it was almost as if they were given the basic skeleton of the house, and they could themselves, with that knowledge of the wider view, could actually put in the furniture in the house piece by piece. And it fit so well because they understood the deeper structure of what we do in the BRC. I think that those SAM principles were really core to the candidates' understanding of, okay, this is the large picture. Now I get what we have to do here. And it kind of then started coming natural to them. And also the teamwork for them. What I've never seen a group of people become such a cohesive, well-working team so quickly, because nobody was boastful and nobody was arrogant and nobody was, I ride 1,000,000 miles a year. And they were just all, hey, what's the best way that we can work together to get this done? And they were really focused on the structural piece so so vividly that the content just kind of came naturally. They would just go, oh, okay, this exercise, this is how it's built. What is the specific information that we need? It was really interesting to see it presented that way. I've always been involved in preps that were facilitated exactly the opposite, where the content was the most important thing. And candidates never understood that basic large picture, which made it so much easier for these candidates to put in the details. That's what I saw from the big view, Mark.
Thank you. So, and the idea behind it is that they realize, the candidates can realize that their growth is due to their effort and their learning, not dependent on what I'm telling them, because I don't tell them very much.
Hey, Mark, it's Alan. I liked your material you presented a great deal. I think I agree with almost all of it. But it's very interesting is, I think something similar that we just are going through now, like we talked about getting comfortable with it and getting an expert at it, and then bouncing back out of that. Like Don, you and I went through that adventure bike as I was the trainer, and going completely out of your comfort zone, getting onto the dirt, learning a whole new curriculum, learning a totally different way to ride. And then having to deal with the variables of the weather, the atmosphere, the types of motorcycles, the types of tires, all that changes how you have to train, how you have to coach, how you have to interact, think on your feet. And like you said, come up with a structure versus the content, or how do you deliver the content with a totally different structure. A very interesting exercise that we went down through there just a few weeks ago. And, it very much, I think we used a lot of those types of materials you're talking about to try and deliver the content in a different way. So I think it's great for everybody to have a spot where they can get out of their comfort zone, approach a learning technique in a different manner than typical. And then having to go through something from scratch and to be reset. It's definitely valuable in that. But how do you get a lot of coaches to do it who are happy teaching the VRC at a basic level and just doing their job? That's, I think, a challenge.
Oh, something I think has been helping at my program is that the more experienced coaches started to notice that some of the newer coaches were more, in many cases, well, they weren't experts on where the cones go or exactly how to arrange things in the classroom. The more experienced coaches started recognizing that the newer coaches were more effectively communicating with the students. They were actually getting better results in some cases, or lower stress levels from the students. They were getting more cooperation, and were able to be quite successful despite what the more experienced coaches were initially seeing as a lack of expertise.
Are there any more questions for Mark on this topic?
Hi, Mark. This is Sarah from Illinois. I had a quick question regarding the rankings of the coaches and how they were able to measure. Were the coach candidates aware of the ranking? And if so, did that play into any of their effort or motivation that you saw?
No, not really at all. Personally, I think that a ranking system like that is kind of silly. I don't see a lot of purpose to it, but it seems to be something that is useful to help finding your way along. Maybe different people have different motivations. A lot of people seem to be motivated by having some sort of levels. even if they're not discrete levels, but having that idea of a way to progress. So as far as the candidates, all that I think I ever pointed out to them was there were, in section 5, we had all these lists of ways to tell how you're doing, and left it at that. But even in the program I manage, we don't use any sort of rankings. All the coaches are treated completely equally, from the coaches that have been there for decades to the coaches that have been in the program for less than a year. They're all treated exactly the same.
I would like, if everybody doesn't mind, to jump in here for a moment. And I'm going to pull up a slide. And this was from part 1 of professional development that we talked about last month in preparing for this. And as I pull up the slide, please give me a nod that you see it. And looking at this definition from last week, does what Mark described tonight fit into this professional development definition from Wikipedia? Do you see anything that's missing from either Mark's or this definition? I'm going to go ahead and stop the share now and go back to ask one last question, because I think something that Sarah brought up is pretty important. In looking at this definition and what Mark has given to us tonight, was there any talk about comparison between rider coaches and their levels? Or was it purely just the ability to kind of look at yourself, do a self-assessment, given the information that you know from the Rider Coach Guide? And I would like to add not only the Rider Coach Guide, but the MSF standards, the rules for professional conduct, and any jurisdictional policies and procedures. If you had that information, and I'm sure everybody does in their area, could you make a self-assessment and know what you need to work on, and maybe what is working for you at this time? Head nods, yes, it's all acceptable.
You know, Don, it's Al. I think you could, if you're capable, and I'm not quite sure how to phrase that. There's some people that either refuse to self-assess or refuse to self-assess themselves accurately. You know what I mean?
I do. And, I'm glad you brought that up, because Mark kind of addressed that. As we have newer rider coaches that are exposed to new learning methodologies, whether it be how Mark does things or adult learning is becoming more captivating in the educational systems, people have a tendency to notice whether or not they're keeping up with things. And I think that is the way cultures change. It doesn't happen quickly. If you talk to a educational professional who learned about education in the 70s and the 80s, they may not be very familiar with adult learning methodologies and andragogy, because that's not how they learned. If you talk to somebody that has been through adult education or educational methodologies in the last 10 or 15 years, it may be a little bit different. Sarah, you got your hand up. What's your thoughts?
My thought was that I noticed that this was the first prep I'd ever seen where Mark had these candidates self-assessing by asking them a thought-provoking, creative, and comforting question every morning, question or two, that was specifically about their own self-assessment. And they spent a good 15 minutes on it every morning before they started their day, specifically on self-assessment. Questions like, what did you work on yesterday? What did you struggle with yesterday? How are you feeling about your competency levels right now? What do you think would help you change? He had them thinking about their own professional development and their own self-assessment every morning before they started out with any content work, which I think ultimately was extremely helpful for these folks.
Laying the foundation early.
Good observation, Don.
So any other comments or questions about tonight's subject?
I think
Go ahead,
sorry,
Rick.
Don. I think that one of the points Mark made is the idea of not so much the quantity of teaching sessions, but the quality of sessions. And if you're so busy teaching week after week, or however your schedule is, are you really taking the time to do a self-assessment? And what I think might be beneficial is just be an observer of a class, to self-assess, of course, do a self-assessment, but do an assessment of the coaches, what you would do differently, and that'll give you some third-person time to develop ideas you have that could improve yourself.
Completely agree, Rick. I know that, from my experience, what little I may have, those weeks where I was running 2 and 3 classes, I didn't do a lot of self-reflection. I was worried about getting everything done, shutting it down so I could get home and relax after being on the range that much. So how many of us really take the time with other rider coaches after each course to kind of assess how it went? What was in the military, we'd call it an after action review. What worked, what different, what didn't, what do we want to keep, and what do we need to change? Those discussions are important.
And it's interesting that you bring that up. I have one of my coaches who's been working at the site for, I think, a little over 2 years now. And he's one of the coaches who is always asking, how did I do? Am I doing okay? And is constantly concerned about his progress. He's one of the coaches that I always get a self-assessment from. I always get a reflective piece, especially after any course that was challenging, that there were new things or unexpected things occurred. He's always paying attention to what's going on, and not so much focused on, it's not all focused on the details of the course. It's focused on the students and how they were responding and the things he was trying to better fit what the students needed.
Not to pass judgment on this rider coach, but do you see where those reflective questions have helped him on the continuing of becoming a better rider coach?
Absolutely. One of the things I let him know early on is when he started to express some concern about his abilities, because he was working with much more experienced coaches. I pointed out, I said, the very fact that you're taking the time to send me these questions tells me that you're aware and tells me that you're growing professionally. I don't have to go out and look or examine. I can tell by just what you're writing that you are thinking far beyond the surface of the class.
Well, I want to be the first one then tonight to thank you so very much, Mark, for sharing all this great information with us. Everybody, please, a round of applause, virtual or otherwise, for Mark. Thank you once again for sharing these great things. And because it is our anniversary, I have our Tribe Talk poll ready to go for the evening. I'm going to launch polling tonight. I've added a few extra kind of fun questions and then one from the typical type questions. So you should be able to see the polling now. I don't know if we have anybody connected by phone who can't see these tonight, but I will read them. The first question is, how many Tribe Talks have there been? Your potential answers are 15, 45, 25, 35, and 52. So I'll remind you that this is our first year anniversary. Second question was, when was the first Tribe Talk? Can everybody see him? I'm not seeing anybody vote yet. It's kind of scary. Okay. The first Tribe Talk dates is 29 March 2020, 5 April 2020, 21 March 2020, 21 February 2020, and 21 February 2021. How many presenters have provided topics on Tribe Talk? First choice is 25, second is 35, third is 24, fourth is 44, and fifth is 14. And then lastly, I can already see my typo. Which of the following is true regarding information in the Rider Coach Guide? A, the basic rider course consists of approximately 25 hours of instruction. B, there are 5 classroom units and 17 writing exercises. C, additional time for remedial training is encouraged. D, attending Tribe Talk is recommended. And E, there is no information regarding a warming up exercise between level 1 and level 2 range. We have about 57% voted. I'll give it another, we'll call it a minute. While people are voting, are there any questions about tonight or future Tribe Talks? This formal Tribe Talk stuff really kills me. I like it when we talk more.
Ask your question again, please.
Which question?
The one you just asked.
Is there anything that you would like to discuss about tonight's Tribe Talk, previous Tribe Talks, or future Tribe Talks?
So this is Justin McDonald. I'm in Wyoming.
Hey, Justin.
This is my first one. I just wanted I only arrived about halfway through, so I didn't see the format in the beginning. Do you all, is it always kind of a presentation every time, or do you just have a little bit of open conversation?
So with Tribe Talks on Sundays, and we have been doing them once a month on Sundays lately, we usually have some formal presentation. Every Wednesday night when we get together between 7 and 9 p.m. Eastern time, it's called happy hour. It's whatever people bring up, we talk about.
Sweet. Thank you.
You're welcome. And bring your friends if you're going to come back again.
Copy that.
All right, 79% voted.
All right, Don, before you get to the
All right.
results, I'd just like to throw out a thank you to you for starting this. This has been a fantastic resource for me as a rider coach. It's great. It's nice being around like-minded people. I haven't always made everyone, but I've tried. It's become a priority for my Wednesday nights to come to happy hour. I really enjoy it, and thank you very much for starting it.
Appreciate it. And it's because of people like you that we keep coming back.
I will
You mean
second that
everybody
for
else,
sure.
not me.
Yeah, so I'll definitely second that, Matt. It has made me a much better coach, and I have learned so much from you guys all over the country. So I appreciate each and every one of you, and Dawn, I appreciate you so much for starting this. And like I said, it's been a very big blessing, and I know not only has it helped us, but it has helped those amazing students out there. So thank you so very much.
Thank you, Belinda. Okay, 86% voted. I've given you a whole 5.5 minutes to do it and end the polling, and I will share the results. I'm not going to go through all of these tonight. I'm going to just tell you that C was the answer for them all. You can look at them yourself. We've had 25 total Sunday formal tribe talks in this last year. First one was on 21 March 2020. We've had 24 different presenters. Some presenters have presented more than once, some several times. So thank you to all the presenters that have made this happen over the last year. I'd give you the whole list, but then we'd be on another half an hour. And then lastly, additional time for remedial training is encouraged, is true from the Rider Coach Guide. So thank you for your participation in the Tribe Talk poll tonight. I'm going to share a screen real quick. Not if you can see it, I'd appreciate that. All right. So how to build the tribe. I can't tell you how wonderful it's been to have the tribe of people that have shown up in the last year. I still want to invite others to participate. And I really, really am looking for people to share ideas and future topics and be a presenter to share your thoughts in rider education. This is a great platform, but we really need more support, more people to give of themselves to keep it up. My biggest thing that I always talk about, if you're not mentoring somebody, you should be, because I believe that you would be a great mentor. And I know that just because you show up to things like this. And likewise, look for somebody to mentor you. Nobody does it alone. And once again, like I say all the time, we're all rider coaches, and we all got to help each other to improve and be better. So please mentor or be a mentor for somebody. Wrap up for tonight, professional development part 2. Thank you, Mark Weiss, for your excellent information. As always, got some great notes to share with you, and I can't wait for us to maybe put the band back together. We had the Tribe Talk weekly poll. I hope it was a little bit of fun tonight. It was for me to look back on how much has been done over the last year. Next Tribe Talk is Sunday, April 25th. I do not have a topic for it yet. I have something in mind I have to coordinate. But if you have a topic you'd like to share with other people, just like Mark did tonight, please get a hold of me, and we'll keep this going as long as we have people to present. Last thing is Tribe Talk Happy Hour happens every Wednesday night, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. It is a free-for-all. Bring whatever you want to discuss. I think we discussed nails and hair last week. It was pretty wild. last thing is it's been a lot of work doing this the last year. I may have to pull back a little bit to get on with some other things, so I'm looking for more help from more people to keep this up and running. Please don't be afraid to reach out to me. I love you all. I think you do some of the best work in any form of education in all the United States and maybe the world. And it's been a real pleasure to maintain such a group of wonderful professionals around me to feed me information, to keep me excited about what we're doing. And I thank each and every one of you for that. So with it, I love you. Don't take that the wrong way. And I'll see you Wednesday on Tribe Talk Happy Hour. Have a good night.
Good night, all.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks again, Mark. That was great.